Every single day we wake up and our minds begin scanning for what's wrong or what's right, what's missing or what's already there, what hurts or what heals. This scan isn't random, it's trained. And it's trained by what we choose to focus on over and over again. Focus isn't just mental, it's emotional, it's physiological. It determines the quality of our thoughts and ultimately the quality of our lives. Whatever we consistently give our attention to becomes the lens through which we see the world. And that lens can either empower us or paralyze us. Here's the true thing: what you focus on, you feel. You could be in the most beautiful place in the world, paradise, sunshine, palm trees, and still feel miserable if you're focused on a mistake you made last week or a conversation that went wrong or something someone said years ago. On the other hand, you could be going through a tough time dealing with real pain, loss, struggle, and still find strength, still feel gratitude, still see opportunity if your focus is aligned with what lifts you rather than what limits you. It's not the event that defines our experience, it's the focus we bring to it. When we focus on what we can't control, we feel helpless. When we focus on what we can control, we become resourceful. When we focus on what's missing, life feels like a deficit. When we focus on what we already have, no matter how small, life feels full. Think about that for a moment. Two people can go through the same situation, the same breakup, the same financial loss, the same setback, and walk with entirely different outcomes, not because one was lucky and the other wasn't, but because one chose to focus on the opportunity and the other focused on the loss. Same facts, different focus, different life. Your focus creates your filters, and your filters control your experience. They decide what enters your mind and what gets blocked out. And because your nervous system wants to reinforce your dominant patterns, your brain will keep looking for more of what you focus on, whether it serves you or not. That's why when someone is constantly focused on problems, they seem to find more problems everywhere. They become magnets for negativity. Not because the world changed, but because their filters did. The same is true in reverse. Someone who's trained their focus on possibilities sees doors that others overlook. They're not blind to reality. They just refuse to give their energy to what weakens them. They don't deny the existence of problems, but they don't obsess over them either. Their focus is a weapon, precise, intentional, and powerful. Focus is not about ignoring reality. It's about choosing which reality you want to feed. There are people who focus on their past, the regrets, the guilt, the shame, and they carry it like a weight. It clouds their present and steals their future. And there are people who learn from the past but focus forward on growth, on healing, on progress. And they become unstoppable. There are people who wake up focused on what the day might take from them. They start with dread, anxiety, fear. And there are those who wake up and focus on what the day might give them. A moment of joy, a challenge to conquer, someone to serve, someone to learn. Same world, different focus. And it's not just individual. You see it in relationships. When someone first falls in love, what are they focused on? Everything that's beautiful. The way that person smiles, the little quirks that make them unique, the time they make for you. Fast forward a few years, and if the focus shifts from what's right to what's wrong, from gratitude to complaint, suddenly that same relationship starts to feel cold, distant, disconnected. Nothing changed except the focus. But that one shift can be the difference between passion and resentment, connection and collapse. Focus is a decision, and it's one you make constantly, not once a year, not when life gets hard, every moment, every day. What are you going to look for today? Evidence that life is against you, or signs that life is trying to teach you something. Proof that you're failing, or signals that you're growing. The more you condition your focus, the more control you have over your emotional state. You can't always control what shows up in life, but you can always control what you choose to lock your attention on. People often say, I just want to feel better. But feeling better doesn't start with changing your circumstances. It starts with changing your focus. The fastest way to shift how you feel is to shift what you're looking at. If you want to feel grateful, focus on what you can appreciate right now. If you want to feel motivated, focus on the outcome you're working toward, not the obstacles in your way. You already have the power. The challenge is using it consciously. Most people don't lose to failure. They lose to distraction. Their focus gets hijacked by noise, negativity, comparison. Their attention is consumed by what others think, what's trending, what's out of reach. And that mental pollution becomes their emotional climate. You can't focus on storms and feel sunny inside. So every day, remind yourself where your focus goes, your life follows. At any moment in your life, something happens, an event, a work, a tone, a message. Life delivers its raw material, but that material alone isn't what determines how you feel. What matters is the meaning you assign to it, because meaning isn't automatic. It's crafted, decided. You and I are constantly interpreting the world. Something happens, and we immediately give it a label. That label triggers a feeling, and that feeling drives our behavior. But here's the part most people missing: the label is a choice. And because meaning is a choice, your emotional life isn't based on what's real. It's based on what you've decided is real. This is one of the most powerful human gifts. The ability to take any experience and assign meaning to it. And yet, most of us give this power away. We react automatically. We interpret situations through the lens of our past pain, our insecurities, our fears. We let our old story define the new moment. But it doesn't have to be that way. You can rewrite the story right now, because the same event can mean wildly different things depending on the meaning you attach to it. You lose a job. That could mean you're worthless, unwanted, and falling behind. And if you give it that meaning, that's how you'll feel. Or it could mean this is the moment you finally stop settling, that it's the push the universe gave you to build something better. And if that's the meaning you choose, it changes your energy, your action, your outcome. Someone walks away from you. You could decide that means you weren't enough, that you're not lovable. Or you could decide it means you just cleared space for someone who's actually aligned with who you are becoming. The event is the same. The emotions are night and day because meaning drives emotion. Think of every defining moment in your life: the day that broke you, the moment that lifted you, the turning point, the comeback. Each of those moments shaped you, but only because of the meaning you gave to them. People say, "This moment changed me." No. Your interpretation of that moment changed you. This is why two people can go through the same experience, a crisis, a loss of betrayal, and come out in completely different emotional states. One becomes bitter. The other becomes wiser. One closes their heart. The other opens theirs even wider. Why? Not because of the event, but because of the meaning. Let's take it even deeper. Let's talk about your identity. Who you believe you are. Your self-image is made up of the meanings you've attached to your past. If you've interpreted setbacks as proof that you're a failure, you'll carry that identity. If you've interpreted setbacks as training for your strength, you'll carry that instead. You are not your experiences. You are the meaning you've chosen to take from them. There are people who spend years carrying pain from things that happened decades ago, not because the pain is still real, but because they've never updated the meaning. They still see it through the lens of their old self. But you're not that person anymore. You've grown. You've evolved. And that means you can go back to those same memories and look at through a new lens, a wiser lens, a more powerful lens. This doesn't mean we deny pain or pretend everything is positive. It means we stop letting our interpretation of pain define us. Pain will visit. But suffering, that's often the result of a meaning we've lived too long. A story we've refused to challenge. A belief we never questioned. Even in the darkest moments, you have the power to ask a better question: what else could this mean? What is this here to teach me? How could this be happening for me instead of to me? Because every time you upgrade your meaning, you upgrade your emotion. And when you upgrade your emotion, you change your decisions, your behavior, your trajectory. This is especially true in relationships. Think of how quickly emotions can change based on how we interpret someone's behavior. They don't text back, and you decide it means they're ignoring you or disrespecting you or losing interest. That meaning instantly triggers anxiety or anger, but maybe they're overwhelmed. Maybe they're dealing with something personal. Maybe they just forgot. The truth is, you don't know. But the meaning you assign becomes your emotional reality. That's how conflict is born, not from facts, but from interpretation. And the same happens with ourselves. You try something and it doesn't work. And you decide that means you're not good enough. You make a mistake and you decide it means you're broken. But failure isn't final. Mistakes don't mean you're unworthy. They mean you're human. They mean you're growing. If you change the meaning, You change the story you tell yourself when you look in the mirror. Some people wake up every day and decide that life is hard. People are selfish and nothing ever goes their way. That's the meaning they've trained. So that's the emotion they wake up into. Others wake up and decide that life is challenging but full of gifts. That people are messy but beautiful. That every day holds opportunity. That meaning creates an entirely different life. You're the author. You're the narrator. And your emotion follows your narrative. At some point, thinking isn't enough. Planning isn't enough. Dreaming, visualizing, hoping, all of that matters, but none of it changes your life until you act. Action is the bridge between the internal and the external. It's the moment where intention becomes reality. And more than that, action is the forge where identity is built. People often think identity is who they are, but who you are isn't fixed. It's not some label stamped on you at birth. Who you are is shaped by what you repeatedly do. Your identity is a reflection of your patterns. It's the accumulation of decisions made, steps taken, and habits formed. Every time you act, especially when it's difficult, you're casting a vote for the person you're becoming. That means every action counts. Every moment you choose courage over comfort, you build the identity of someone who is brave. Every time you show up on the days you don't feel like it, you reinforce the identity of someone who is consistent. Every small decision to do what matters, even when nobody's watching, becomes part of your internal architecture. This is the truth most people overlook. It's not motivation that builds discipline. It's discipline that builds motivation. You don't wait to feel like it. You act your way into feeling, because emotion follows motion. You move your body, you shift your energy, you take a step, and momentum meets you. Action wakes you up. It reminds you that you're not stuck. You're not helpless. You're not your fears. You're someone who moves, someone who builds, someone who decides. It doesn't have to be a massive leap. It could be small, incredibly small, but it has to be real. You can sit on a couch and read every book on confidence. You can listen to every podcast on courage, but none of it means anything until you do the thing that scares you, until you hit send. Speak up. Take the risk. Apply anyway. Start the project. Make the call. When you act, even in fear, something fundamental shifts. You don't just change your circumstances, you change yourself. That's why action matters more than words, more than dreams, more than goals written down in some notebook. You become what you consistently do, not what you occasionally intend. You can intend to be a leader, but until you lead, in conversations, in decisions, in your own example, you won't believe it. You can intend to be healthy, but until you show up for your body, your meals, your recovery, it won't become part of who you are. Action is how you prove to yourself that you're serious. And the most important person you need to convince is not the world. It's you. Because when your actions are aligned with your highest standards, your confidence skyrockets. Not the fake kind of confidence that needs applause, but the real kind that comes from self-respect, from the quiet knowing that you do what needs to be done, no matter what. This is where transformation begins. Not with inspiration, but with movement. It doesn't have to be perfect. In fact, perfection is the enemy of progress. The need to do it right often keeps people from doing anything at all. But clarity comes through engagement. The path reveals itself after you take the first step. You learn more from 1 hour of action than 100 hours of overthinking. Movement teaches. Momentum teaches. Doing the thing is what builds the muscle. Sometimes action is uncomfortable. Sometimes it's awkward, even painful. But it's in those very moments, when you act despite resistance, that the greatest growth happens. Growth doesn't come from ease. It comes from stretching, from leaning into discomfort, from making decisions that align with your future, not your fear. You don't need to have all the answers. You don't need a 10-step plan. You just need to do the next right thing. And then the next, and then the next, because action compounds. 1 day of commitment becomes a week. A week becomes a month. A month becomes a new way of living. Over time, that consistency becomes identity. Not because you forced it, but because you lived it. Your past doesn't define you. Your patterns do. And the beautiful thing is that patterns can change. Habits can evolve. You can become someone completely different by taking different actions. Day by day, decision by decision. This is why hesitation is so dangerous. Every time you hesitate when you know what you should do, you chip away at your trust in yourself. And every time you follow through, even if it's messy or imperfect, you have a reinforced belief. That belief becomes your new foundation. The more you act with courage, the more you believe you are courageous. The more you act with discipline, the more you see yourself as disciplined. Identity isn't something you chase. It's something you build through repetition and resolve. There are people waiting for the right time, the right mood, the perfect conditions. But the right time is the moment you move. The right time is when you stop waiting and start doing. Every time you act, you send a message to your subconscious, this is who I am now. I am not someone who waits. I am not someone who talks but never builds. I am someone who takes action, who creates, who life happens to all of us. It doesn't matter where you were born, what you look like, what your past holds, or what challenges you didn't choose. Circumstances are real. Some are painful, some are unfair, some are beyond our control. But while circumstances shape the playing field, they do not decide the outcome. It's your decisions, not your environment, that determine your destiny. There are people who grow up with every disadvantage, every obstacle imaginable, and still rise. Not because their circumstances changed, but because they made decisions powerful enough to override them. The decision to believe in possibility, the decision to fight when it's easier to quit, the decision to act even when the odds are stacked against them. And there are others who seem to have everything, the support, the education, the resources, and yet stay stuck. Not because they're cursed or broken, but because they've made disempowering decisions to blame instead of own, to wait instead of move, to settle instead of rise. The quality of your life is not dictated by what you start with. It's shaped by what you decide to do with what you've been given. Every moment you are making decisions. What to focus on, how to interpret things, what to do next. These decisions may seem small, but they are never insignificant. They stack, they compound. Over time, they create a trajectory, and that trajectory becomes your life. The most dangerous lie we're told is that we are the product of our circumstances. That if you're born into pain, you'll stay in pain. That if you've failed, you'll keep failing. That if people have hurt you, you're doomed to carry that forever. That's not truth. That's programming. And the moment you begin to see yourself as the decision maker, not the victim of your story, you reclaim your power. You don't get to choose the storms that come your way, but you do get to decide whether you build shelter or surrender. You don't get control who lets you down, but you do get to decide whether you close off or stay open. You don't get to erase your past, but you do get to decide what meaning you attach to it and how it fuels your future. Those are decisions, and they matter more than any external factor you will ever face. There is something unshakable about has made a decision, a real decision, not a preference, not a wish, a decision, the kind that cuts off all other options. That level of commitment is rare because it requires ownership. It requires responsibility. It means you no longer wait for someone else to fix things. You have a screwed up life. It means you don't need the world to give you permission. You give it to yourself. When you decide that you will grow, nothing can stop you from learning. When you decide that you will lead, you'll find a way to influence even without a title. When you decide to rise, no circumstance is strong enough to keep you down. Your decision becomes the fire that outlasts the storm. It becomes the foundation you build on no matter what life throws your way. Too many people wait for life to get easier before they commit. They wait for motivation, for certainty, for the right timing. But strength doesn't come from ease. It comes from deciding to move forward even when everything around you says stop. It comes from saying, I don't know how yet, but I will figure it out. That decision, even in uncertainty, has the power to override fear, to override doubt, to override limitation. There are those who will point to their environment as evidence of why they can't. They will say, look at my background. Look at my past. Look at the way people treat me. And all of that may be real. But then there are others who face the same kind of adversity and use it as fuel. They decide that their past won't be a prison. It will be their platform. They decide that the more they've been through, the stronger they'll become. Same pain, different choice. Same challenge, different outcome. Circumstances can make things harder, but they cannot make things impossible unless you decide they can. That's the key. No matter where you are or what you're facing, there's always a decision within your control. You can choose to learn. You can choose to grow. You can choose to take the next step. And sometimes That single step, that single decision is what changes everything. The moment you stop negotiating with your limitations and start deciding based on your potential, you begin to access a different level of life. A life not dictated by chance, but created by choice. You start to experience what it means to live by design instead of default. Circumstances may press on you, but your decisions define you. You may not be able to rewrite where you started, but you can absolutely decide where you're headed. And that is the difference between those who stay stuck and those who lead themselves into transformation. There's a difference between living and truly being alive. Most people move through life on autopilot. They repeat. They respond out of habit, not intention. They wake up thinking the same thoughts, feeling the same emotions, doing the same things they did yesterday. Not because that's what they truly want, because they've never stopped if those choices are actually aligned with who they're becoming. But life doesn't respond to what you want. It responds to what you consistently choose. And the moment you start choosing consciously, your entire reality begins to shift. Conscious choice is the act of reclaiming your power from the noise of the world. It means you're no longer driven by default settings, by fear, by patterns, by inherited beliefs. It means you are aware, awake, and intentional about the decisions you make. That awareness is the birthplace of power, because without it, even the smartest person can end up stuck in a life that doesn't belong to them. You're making choices all the time, every hour, every day, whether you realize it or not. What to focus on, how to speak to yourself, who to spend time with, what to tolerate, what to pursue. These choices, though often invisible, are never neutral. They either move you forward or hold you back. They either align you with your purpose or distract you from it. And the difference between someone who thrives and someone who simply survives is this: one makes choices with intention, the other lets choices happen to them. When you begin to choose consciously, you start living by design, not by default. You stop waiting for circumstances to improve and start deciding who you want to be in the middle of whatever you're facing. And the moment you take ownership of your choices, you realize that even if you can't control everything around you, you can always control the way you respond. That response, that conscious choice, becomes the place where transformation begins. This kind of power isn't loud. It's not about controlling others or dominating situations. It's not about forcing life to bend to your will. It's about knowing that your greatest strength lies in your ability to respond deliberately. It's the quiet but fierce realization that you choose. You choose how you show up. You choose how you treat people. You choose whether you give up or get up. You choose whether today is just another repeat or the day everything changes. Most people are far more conditioned than they are conscious. They're reacting from years of programming. Emotional reflexes built from childhood, unchallenged assumptions handed down from people who were doing the best they could, but may not have known better. And if you don't become aware of that, you'll live a life based on someone else's rules, someone else's fear, someone else's limitation, never realizing that you had the power to choose differently all along. Awareness is the first step, but awareness without action is wasted potential. Once you become aware of a choice you've been making unconsciously, whether it's how you speak to yourself, how you avoid discomfort, how you use your time, or how you treat your body, the next step is making a new decision. Not once, but repeatedly, because new choices require practice. They require commitment. Your brain will try to pull you back into the familiar. Your emotions will try to protect you from discomfort, but if you can stay present, if you can stay conscious, you can override the pull of the past. This is how you break cycles. This is how you evolve, not by making a massive leap overnight, but by becoming deeply intentional about what you allow, what you pursue, and what you believe. Every small, conscious choice builds momentum. And momentum, over time, becomes identity. When you repeatedly choose discipline, you become someone who's disciplined. When you consistently choose honesty, you become someone who lives in integrity. You don't have to wait for a moment of transformation. You create it through conscious repetition. It's easy to say you want a different life. It's easy to say you want growth or success or freedom. But none of that comes without choices that reflect those desires. You can't want clarity and keep choosing distraction. You can't want health and keep choosing what drains you. You can't want depth and keep choosing surface. Every time you say, I is to something, you're also saying no to something else. Conscious choice is understanding the cost and still choosing in alignment with your highest values. The more deliberate you become, the more powerful you feel. Not because life suddenly gets easier, but because you are no longer handing your life over to chance. You become your own cause, not just an effect. You stop waiting for motivation and start choosing discipline. You stop chasing approval and start choosing truth. You stop living from fear and start choosing faith in your ability to respond, to adapt, to grow. Conscious choice creates inner strength, the kind that doesn't depend on applause or permission, the kind that can weather rejection, setbacks, and uncertainty without losing itself, the kind that knows freedom isn't found in avoiding responsibility, but in owning it fully. When you stop letting your choices be made by your fears, your moods, or your past, you step into a different level of clarity and control. You stop drifting and start directing. You stop surviving and start leading. You stop waiting for life to happen and start living as if every choice counts, because it does every day. You are shaping your life, not in giant dramatic moments, but in small, silent decisions. What you choose to focus on, the meaning you assign to what happens, the actions you take, especially when no one is watching, the choice to lead with intention instead of reacting by default. The decision to rise above your circumstances, not because it's easy, because it's who you've decided to become. You are not your past. You are not your environment. You are not what happened to you. You are what you choose. Repeatedly, relentlessly, consciously. Because in the end, your life doesn't change when everything around you shifts. It changes the moment you do. And that change begins with 3 decisions which you focus on. What it means, and what you're going to do about it. Own those 3, and you don't just influence your life, you lead it.